I would say that the pregame meal, like the food you eat before you go out to the field for the game, is more ritualized. You can't eat a big meal and it has to be something small and, that's not going to fill me up. For me, and this is probably a lot of guys, it's like a peanut butter and jelly is pretty standard.
You're listening to the Taste Podcast. I'm senior editor Anna Hezel, here with editor-in-chief Matt Rodbard.
It's not every day we have a professional athlete on the Taste Podcast. Today is actually a first for us because Anna's talking to Mark Canha, an MLB player who recently signed with the New York Mets. Boo, I'm a Cubs fan, but whatever, Mets are fine. Anna, what was the occasion for talking to a Major League Baseball player on the show?
So, two things here. First of all, one of the most dedicated listeners to the Taste Podcast, who I happen to be engaged to, is a really big Mets fan.
Shouts to Dan.
Shout out to Dan. Secondly, Mark Canha is possibly the only player in the MLB who's also kind of a food personality. He's a passionate, adventurous eater with really good taste in restaurants, and he actually has a very popular food Instagram. His handle is Big League Foodie. So we talked about where he's excited to eat in New York and also his dream stadium food to eat out of a plastic helmet.
Here's Anna talking to Mark.
Mark Canha, welcome to the Taste Podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here.
You are known as someone who loves to eat out. The last 2 years have been such a weird time for restaurants. I'm sure they've been a weird time for baseball as well. But with restaurants, so much opening and closing and false starts and hurdles for businesses to go through, how has your relationship to restaurants and eating out sort of changed during this time?
Yeah, it's changed a lot because my wife and I are very conscious of the virus and careful, as we have 2 little girls. And so we're not eating inside right now. And that's I don't think we would do that if we didn't matter where we live. But in Scottsdale, where we live particularly, we especially don't want to eat inside. So we're only eating outdoors, and that presents challenges at times. And we're kind of sticking to like a couple of restaurants where we're able to do that, where the food is actually decent, which is kind of tough to do right now because being in Scottsdale, there's not a whole lot of great food as it is. So putting the parameter of it has to have an outside area that we can get into and stuff. It's difficult, and we love to eat out, so it sucks, frankly.
Have there been any takeout or delivery MVPs of your pandemic, like either while you've been on the road or at home? Just anything really memorable that you've gotten via takeout?
Yeah, we've been doing this sushi place that we really like. The other day we did like a staycation where my in-laws were nice enough to watch the kids for a day, and we just dropped them off at the in-laws place and came back to our house, and we got sushi for takeout and just had a bottle of wine, and it was like so good. And it's just one of those gems. I feel like like I said, there's not a whole lot of options where we live, and we certainly have like, I think a short list of 4 or 5 restaurants that we frequent pretty often.
What about cooking? Do you cook at all at home? And have you gotten really good at cooking anything during this off season?
We do cook. My wife and I love to cook. It's very hard with kids right now, but I do a lot of pasta and like spaghetti and meatballs. One of my favorite things to do is meatballs, or just meatballs. Sometimes just bolognese if I'm feeling lazy, and just trying to kind of perfect that and like spruce it up with as much stuff to make it kind of fancier. And I just keep thinking about how we're scrambling to make dinners for the kids. And one of the things we recently discovered is that making your own pizza is actually not that difficult. And so we've been doing that because my kids really love pizza. And I think we did it around New Year's where and the kids can throw on some aprons and that's kind of a fun thing we do as a family too. And it's a great way to like get the kids in the kitchen. And I think that's important.
Totally. It's like a whole activity built into dinner, like a whole hands-on experience.
Yeah. And they love it. And they love getting their hands dirty and they love, putting on their aprons and being involved. It's fun for everyone.
You always hear about professional baseball players like pre-game eating rituals and superstitions too. Like there's kind of this urban legend about Babe Ruth and like eating hot dogs. And you always see baseball players on TV chewing sunflower seeds in the dugout. But what are your pre-game like eating habits like? And also like when do you eat before or after a game?
Good question. Well, you have batting practice almost every day. So typically I eat a bigger meal. My big meal of the day is like lunchtime because you have some downtime. When you have a night game, you have some downtime in between lunch and when you have to be on the field for batting practice. So lunch is typically whatever they're serving in the clubhouse. It's usually a catered meal, not always, but sometimes a catered meal like sandwiches or something like that. But then I would say that the pregame meal, like the food you eat before you go out to the field for the game, is more ritualized because you can't eat a big meal and it has to be something small and that's not going to fill me up a lot. So I think for me, and this is probably a lot of guys, it's like a peanut butter and jelly is pretty standard. And me being the person I am is like I'll like try to fancy it up and toast the bread and throw a banana in there and maybe some cinnamon and try to make it fun.
Are you showing up at the game like with all of these supplies to make your own peanut butter sandwich, or like this is just on the spot? You're making it fancy.
This is on the spot. They have some stuff at the field for us. There's like I guess you would like a lunchroom, a cafeteria kind of thing.
Okay.
Yeah, I haven't seen the Mets one yet because I'll be new to the Mets this year. But in Oakland, we had a small lunchroom and if it's the type of thing where if they don't have something, you can always ask for it and they'll kind of get it for you.
Do you have a preferred brand of peanut butter specifically for peanut butter sandwiches?
Yeah, well, I think if you're not talking like local, like I'll just get like a local one or something if I'm in a real hippy dippy place. But since it's the nature of baseball, you're always moving. So Justin's is kind of reliable.
So how many hours before the game is sandwich time?
Sandwich time is probably a little over an hour before the game, probably hour 15 before the game.
And then do you have a big meal after the game, or like are you ever inclined to like celebrate with a big meal like after a really grueling game or after a big win? Yeah,
well, I think in New York that'll be more of an option. It's hard because it's so late. When you play a night game, it's by the time you're done, it's 10, 11 o'clock maybe by the time you're eating because you're showered and stuff. So if I don't really have the option to eat out before, after a game. But now that I live in New York, I guess that option will be the option will be there. But yeah, typically you're eating a lot after the game just because you're hungry and tired and everything. But yeah, because it's so late, that also presents challenges sometimes because you're like, you want to go to sleep soon too. So you kind of you play that balance game where you're like eating enough, but not a crazy amount. And it's easy for me to go overboard and eat too much.
When you're traveling during the season, do you have a chance to eat out in like the actual cities that you're visiting, or do you have to reserve most of your restaurant and like travel eating for off season?
You get a handful of opportunities throughout the course of the year to eat out, whether it's I always try to plan accordingly because there's few opportunities, but I think I'd say about maybe a dozen times a year you get a day game or an off day in another city where you get an opportunity, and it's, sometimes in the past I've gotten lucky where it's in New York, or you get a day or two in New York or a day or two in Chicago or something like that, or Boston. I've had really good meals. So there's definitely opportunities throughout the course of the year to eat out.
You're probably like the most well-known food Instagram in Major League Baseball, I have to
Oh,
imagine.
thank
But
you.
are there other MLB players who are known for being really great cooks, or like just being adventurous restaurant goers, or have you bonded with any other players over food?
I know there's people that are really into food in baseball for sure. I've heard that one of my teammates, my future teammates, Taiwan Walker, is really into food. So I'm looking forward to talking food with him. In the past, there wasn't really any teammates I had in Oakland, but my manager, Bob Melvin, is really into food. We probably had more conversations in my 6 year career in Oakland about food than about baseball. So, and then there were times when he had a relationship with the general manager at the French Laundry, Michael Manillo, and I think Michael would give Bob like recommendations on where to go in certain cities that we were traveling to. So I would pick his brain and get some, and I've had some really good meals based on those recommendations. So
The
he's
Bay
a
Area is
yeah.
also such a good food part of California and like of the country.
Yeah,
Did you
so
have
good.
do you have favorite Bay Area restaurants that you'll really miss?
Yes. And we used to live in the Bay Area, so like full time. So we since we moved to Arizona, I miss the Bay Area like crazy, and eating in San Francisco. I'll miss Dominique Cren's restaurants. I'll miss, not that I go there very often, but Chez Panisse, like being able to have those places at your disposal in Berkeley. And then just like I miss being in the Mission, and which is where we lived for I think just 1 year. We lived in the Mission, and it was like just having all those different grocery stores and ice cream shops and Mexican food and Mission Chinese and like all these cool places that you can go to, all so concentrated in one little like neighborhood of San Francisco. I'll miss like stuff like that. But I think I don't know, but I would imagine New York kind of will have that similar kind of feel to it.
Definitely. Are there restaurants that you're really excited to eat at in New York, or neighborhoods that you're really excited to explore?
Yeah, I don't. The New York that I know is a probably very touristy like New York, and so the places that I want to eat at are like the big name like Michelin star restaurants. But I'll say this, I'm really looking forward to just getting to know like the not those places, and the kind of cooler, lesser known, the places where people who live there eat and stuff like that, like on a more regular basis. So yeah, I'm really just kind of looking forward to getting to know like the real New York food scene, and not just like what I know, which is very little and very touristy, I think.
Totally. Once you live here, you just have your own scene. I think for
Uh
everyone,
huh.
it's totally different too, like what
Yeah.
their view of New York restaurants is.
Yeah. I mean, I'm part of the reason I was really excited to do this podcast was getting to know you and meeting you so that I could hopefully pick your brain once I get to New York, and and you can maybe point me in a direction or two.
Oh, of course. I can also give like baseball coaching tips, anything you need.
Oh yeah, please.
Not really. I'm not an expert in that area. I have another question about like coming to the Mets, coming to New York. Last year, Pete Alonso debuted his polar bear burger at one of the Citi Field's concession stands. If you had like an actual concession item named after you, what do you think the item would be? And like what would sort of like represent you as like both a person and someone who loves food and also as a baseball player?
Yeah, I immediately go to Italian food or maybe Mexican food because my wife is Mexican. So in terms of my food identity, I really like kind of feel connected to the Mexican side. But I come from like an Italian American background and on my mom's side, and we had a lot of like ravioli would be like the food that like my noni makes ravioli, and that's like the thing we have at Thanksgiving that kind of makes us unique. And so now that I'm kind of saying it out loud, I'm like, I think it's got to be raviolis. It would have to be Canha's raviolis.
I love the idea of like even like one of those plastic helmets full of ravioli.
Yeah,
like they do
instead of nachos.
Yeah, totally. Like why not? Why hasn't someone done that?
Totally doable. And I feel like as a concession item, like plausible in the sense that like raviolis can be frozen and you then like easily stored and stuff like that. Like that could totally work.
What would be in your signature ravioli? Like a classic ricotta filling? Would there be like a few options?
Yeah, I think a classic ricotta filling with a nice meat sauce. That's kind of how we do it in my family. I haven't even had like a ravioli out at a restaurant that I even really like can remember, because when I think of ravioli, all I think about is like my nonnies or my mom's, and that's kind of the only time I eat them, I think, is Thanksgiving.
Well, now it could be like game time, like
Yeah.
at Citi Field. That could be the new time.
I think it can and it should.
One last question for you. What is a food city that you're dying to go to and to eat out in that you've never been to?
I'm thinking international because I think I've been to all the good ones in the United States. So I'm going to say like Seoul. I heard you guys talking about it today, or when I was listening to your podcast, and I was like, I need to go to Korea. And so I'm going to say like Asian food of all varieties is just so good to me. And I feel like I know so little about it. And to immerse myself in something like that would be a lot of fun, I think.
Well, Mark, thank you so much for being on the Taste Podcast.
Thanks for having me.
We wanted to jump in today, and really, we love cooking, we love eating out, and as this pandemic kind of fades away, hopefully, we are realizing that restaurants are becoming more a part of our lives. And of course, cooking is always part of our lives. So we wanted to do a 3 favorite things type of segment. We haven't really named it yet. We're going to work on this kind of idea of the 3 things. So Anna, what is one of your 3 things you want to talk about right now in the restaurant world or home cooking world?
Okay. A few weeks ago, Clarissa Y. wrote a story for the New York Times about how the Lunar New Year is celebrated in Singapore through food. And she included a recipe for a Singaporean chicken curry, which I made for the Lunar New Year. And it's so good. It's just this beautiful braised chicken with cinnamon, cloves, coriander, coconut milk, chicken broth. It's so delicious. I had some friends over for dinner. the leftovers were, as is the case with many braised foods, better than even the first day.
I love Clarissa's recipe writing. She's written for Taste, and I have to think about Singapore, and I'm like hearing coconut milk. I'm hearing all these spices, and it's like China meets South Asia. Is that kind of the way the food is kind of plays out in these recipes?
Yeah, there's so many culinary influences coming together in Singaporean culture. I really recommend reading her story, and I recommend that recipe. It's awesome. I also made her nasi biryani, which goes hand in hand with the chicken curry. Really awesome.
Sounds great.
What about you? What have you been eating? What have you been cooking?
I've been cooking less because I've been traveling a little bit more. And I recently visited Los Angeles. I was there visiting my buddy Dan Holzman. We're putting out a cookbook, and we had some filming we were doing for that. So I got to go out to a couple restaurants. I want this segment to be dedicated to some of my LA finds. The first one I want to mention is Dayglow, which is, to many listeners, you may know it as a direct-to-consumer coffee company. Really cool. You can get 1 or 2 or 3 bags delivered to you at a time, and they really articulate this vision of the multi-roaster cafe. The way that you buy coffee, you're not buying it from one place, but you're buying it from multiple places. So you're not just getting Dayglow coffee, but you're getting coffee from Say in Brooklyn or Coffee Collective in Copenhagen. But I went to the cafe in Silver Lake, and it was amazing.
Do they have food, or is it mostly just the experience of trying all these different coffees from all over?
They have a great pastry counter. I actually was going all in on coffees, and I didn't try any of their food. But what I did, I met my buddy Bill Addison there, LA Times critic, and we sampled through some coffees from Manhattan Roasters, from Coffee Collective in Copenhagen, and I just love to look at a wall and see 12 different bags of coffee. If I were to ever open a coffee shop or coffee program, I don't know what you call it, I would do that. I would say, I think that the coffee shop could be the new wine shop.
Oh, yeah, totally. I recently went to Harney & Sons in Manhattan, and they have like a whole wall of teas and these sort of like old-timey ladders for the proprietors to climb up and get down whatever teas you want.
That's cool.
So I'm picturing, the Matt Rodbard coffee wall.
I love a good coffee wall. Anna, what else do you have?
Okay, so this past weekend, I actually went out to eat with some taste writers, Tammy Teclamariam, Max Felkowitz. We went to Elmhurst in Queens. Mm-hmm. And we went to this monthly event that's called the Indonesian Bazaar.
Oh, I love it. I've been 3 times. I love it.
It's so cool. It's basically in like the parish house of a church, and it's a lot of vendors from the neighborhood, from Elmhurst, who are making really incredible food. And so one particular dish I'll call out is that I got a little bit of a variety plate of satay skewers, some chicken, some lamb, some beef, all served over these really delicious, spongy, like sort of cubes of rice cakes.
Yeah.
And then like with peanut sauce sort of poured over. So like the rice cakes kind of soak up the delicious like grilled meat juices and the peanut sauce. It was so good.
I love that place. Did they have any entertainment on the stage? There's like a stage there, and they sometimes will have song and dance. I thought it was pretty cool.
Yeah, we were lucky enough to catch a cooking demonstration about tempeh.
Oh, rad. Nice.
And this particular one was about making tempeh rendang.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
I gotta go. I haven't been back in a couple of years. I'm gonna go there.
Yeah, it's so good. I recommend it to any New Yorker or visitor to New York.
Nice.
So, Matt, what else have you been eating?
Well, in LA, I also made it down to Smorgasburg, which I go there every time I'm there. It's on Sundays. It's downtown at the Row. It's this massive complex of office buildings and sweet greens, and it's kind of an odd place, to be honest. It feels very vacant. I think they've had some challenges. But on Sundays, they transform the parking lot into this amazing outdoor food vendor a vendor setup. And it's always been my favorite stop in LA. The Smorgasburg's been around for a minute. It's been around for like maybe 11, 12 years in New York. And, the ones in Williamsburg are pretty good. They have some good stuff there, but I never really go. But in LA, it's different. And I have to say the two stalls I always go to first are Tacos 1986, which is always, I believe I had a burrito taco there and it was delicious. And Tacos 1986 has been written about in the last few years. It's a streetcar operation operating in Koreatown and in the East Side, but they have a stall there. And Burritos Los Palma, I think I will say this, it is the best burrito I've had in my life. I love it so much. Listeners, if you've ever had it, it's outside of the city, at least the center of the city. I'm bad about LA geography. Maybe it's Bell, California, I think. That might be it. Don't quote me. But the food hall or the food setup at Smorgasburg is amazing for Burritos Las Palmas. So
Very cool.
yeah. What else do you have?
Another dish that I really wanted to shout out is something I make for dinner all the time. It's like, when you're trying to figure out what to cook for dinner and you're just in that specific mood, like just for like dinner food, but you don't know what to cook.
Yeah.
There's this Melissa Clark recipe from the New York Times cooking section where you just like cook some Swiss chard and pancetta in a skillet, crack some eggs in there, and like eat it with a loaf of bread. And it's just like what I'm always in the mood for when I just want like sort of a vegetable, something's kind of healthy that's not going to take an hour to cook. It's really awesome.
So is it charred stems first, then charred leaves, and then pancetta, and then fried egg?
Yeah, some peas as well.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, you kind of cook the leaves and the stems down with a little tiny bit of chicken broth if you have it. Water's fine too. And you just like let it get really tender and juicy and delicious. Throw the crispy pancetta on at the end.
Yeah.
It's just like a perfectly balanced meal in one skillet. It's great.
Sounds so good. Do you add any like sauce to it or any hot sauce?
I had some like black pepper
Yeah.
and pepper flakes, but that's kind of it
Yeah.
for me. You totally could add hot sauce though.
I feel pancetta needs to always be in my fridge. I love pancetta.
It's so good. I mean, better yet, your freezer.
Right, freezer, duh. Yeah, it's you can handle it much easier in the freezer. I like the Susan Goen pancetta and Brussels sprouts that she did for the New York Times Thanksgiving issue like 12 years ago, 14 years ago. Love
Cool.
pancetta and Brussels sprouts.
I'll check it out.
I
What
have
else?
one more to say, and then we can close. And it's extremely biased, but my buddy Daniel Holzman and co-author of Food IQ, the book we worked on, he has a pizza shop in downtown LA called Danny Boy's Famous Original, and I got to try some pizza there. I guess I also ball some doughs. He was a little short-handed, so I got my shirt all floury, and I have to say the guy is making amazing pizza down there. It is delicious. It's a New York style slice, so he's got a kind of a bread oven, style pizza. It's not Neapolitan. It's not pan. He does a Sicilian as well, which I think stacks up with a lot of the great Sicilians in New York. And he has a lot of attitude, and it's really fun. So I suggest if you're in LA, going downtown to Danny Boy's Famous Original. Love it.
That sounds awesome. I also want to say I feel like LA doesn't have that many options for Sicilian pie. I mean, in New York, there's so many places that make it, but
I think Tejal's written about the pizza scene in LA and has made claims it's better than New York or something along those lines. And I feel that's valid. There's some amazing pizzerias there. Maybe I just wrote a story for her in the future. I can't remember if she wrote that story.
she wrote about bagels.
Oh,
with that claim.
bagels. Sorry, Tejal. I may have just messed up the bagel and pizza thing, but maybe you should just check out the pizza in LA and make your own decision.
When you were actually like helping to make pizza with Dan, were you doing the thing you see in movies where they like toss the dough in the air and then catch it and it helps stretch it out?
I was balling
Also,
portions.
were you wearing like a chef's toque, like a puffy paper hat of some kind.
I was wearing a really great Danny Boy's hat, which is like the LA Dodgers, but formed with a slice. It's great. No, I was actually just making these balls, and it was the balls that were proofing for like 48, 72 hours. So I had to like get all the air bubbles out of the ball. So it's like a really specific style of or process to ball it and mash it. And I mean, look back into a pizzeria. Like if you're ever around waiting for your pie to come out, look at the work that goes into pizza. It's pretty amazing. And even if the pie is like average, you still have to respect all the work that goes into it.
And there's always that guy in the back in the kitchen who just was visiting his friend. He's just in town for a couple days. He got roped into making some dough balls.
There's always that.
Every pizzeria has one.
Yeah, the absolute sucker move who's wearing a dark shirt and doesn't have a change of clothes and gets to go to his next appointments covered in flour. Yes, everybody has a friend like that.
Well, awesome. I can't wait to go to LA next time and check out some of these spots.
Exactly. Well, great catching up, Anna.
The Taste Podcast is hosted by Matt Rodbard and me, Anna Hezel. The show is produced by Pat Stango and edited by Clayton Gumbert. Our theme music is by Steve Rydell. Visit Taste online at tastecooking.com and make sure to subscribe to our newsletter. Thanks for listening.